Hello and welcome to the wonderful world of watercolor painting. This series of Learn to Paint step-by-step painting projects will be the starting off point of your creative journey. I'll be demonstrating the basic techniques of watercolor painting as you follow along with me. At the end of our creative Learn to Paint step-by-step painting project session, you will have completed all 4 watercolor paintings. Okay, so let's get started. Grab a pencil, brush, project image, graphite paper, watercolor paper, palette, and paints. And don't forget the water. Your Learn to Paint step-by-step project kit includes a watercolor dot card containing all of the watercolor paint needed for your projects. I'll show you several different ways to use this paint. You'll need water, scissors, your palette, and a paintbrush. One way to use the paint is to simply wet the colors with your paintbrush to reactivate the pigment. This paint is water soluble, so all you need is water to achieve brilliant colors. This is a great way to use the paint if you're on the go. When working on your projects, the recommended way to re-wet your paint is to cut on the dotted line to separate one project from the others. Next, simply cut around each dot of paint and place the colors in your palette. You can keep the name of the paint for reference as you work. Once your paint is in the palette, place water in each well and allow it to rest and reactivate the paint before using the color. Once you have re-wet the paint, pull the paint onto your brush and begin using it for your project. This is a simple demonstration on how to transfer a line drawing to your watercolor paper. Position the image on the watercolor paper. Using a piece of low-tack tape, adhere the image to the paper. This will keep your image from sliding around as you work on your transfer. You should be able to lift up your image and place it back down without the paper shifting. This way you can check on your transfer while you work. Slip the transfer paper between your drawing and watercolor paper. Make sure the darker graphite-coated side is facing down. Next, begin tracing over your image with the pencil or pen. Once the image is traced, flip up the drawing, keeping it tacked down at the top. Take away the transfer paper and study the drawing to make sure nothing is missing. I can see there are a few places where I've missed some lines on this crane. Place the paper back between the drawing and watercolor surface. It doesn't matter if you move the graphite paper as long as it covers the areas that have not yet been transferred. Finish the drawing by tracing over any areas that might not have been transferred and take another look. Once the entire drawing is transferred, remove the image. This transfer paper can be reused many times until the graphite fades. For this painting, we'll be using a vibrant palette of color to capture one of the farm's most iconic animals, the rooster. With his colorful plumage and commanding demeanor, the rooster is an inspiring character to paint. Let's take a look at the colors for this project. Italian burnt sienna is a rich reddish brown. Because this pigment is made from natural sources, it has a wonderful earthy finish with distinct granulation as it settles into the texture of your watercolor paper. Permanent red is an extremely bold and powerful red. This mid-range tone has a dark value at full strength and is perfect for mixtures where you need a smooth, true red. In lighter applications, permanent red washes out to a soft pink. Phthalo green is a lively watercolor with brilliant transparency. This useful shade has a warm tone and it doesn't granulate, resulting in a smooth finish and bright color. Highly pigmented and staining, it is assertive in mixtures, and when dry will not lift from your watercolor paper. Let's begin the rooster painting by creating a very dark, nearly black mixture. Start by moving some of the phthalo green paint to an empty well on your palette. This is a very strong color, so we'll balance it by mixing in some permanent red. Combined, these two colors will make a very dark neutral tone. You may need to adjust your color by adding more red if the shade looks a little green, or by adding more green like I'm doing here. By adding a touch more phthalo green, I've made a shade that's a very deep gray. Using a round watercolor brush with a pointed tip, carefully paint in the rooster's eye with this dark shade. Also, start making some outlines in the darker areas of the painting. Use this mixture at the bottom of the beak and around the top part of the head. This color is very important as we move into the bird's tail. Use this deep tone to fill in all the darkest areas of the painting. There's a white section of feathers where the tail meets the body of the bird, and we'll apply a dark shadow right under this area. Also, use this shade on the bird's tail. We're filling in the negative space of the rooster's tail. What that means is that we're working around the feathers of the tail, painting in all of that background structure on the bird. Later, when we paint the tail feathers, these dark areas will provide contrast and depth in the painting. Follow the line drawing to fill in around the shape of each feather, adding details to the shape of the most predominant feathers. Also, using this dark color, paint the underside of the tail feathers on the back part of the rooster. This will look like a shadow under the feathers and will give more structure to the bottom of the bird. While these first dark layers of paint dry, mix a touch of the deep gray shade into the phthalo green watercolor. Adding this small amount of gray takes away from some of the brightness of the phthalo green, giving us a natural color for the feathers on our rooster. Use this color on the lower part of the rooster, painting over the details of the line drawing that show where each individual feather on the wing is placed. You should still be able to see these lines faintly through the wash of paint. We'll come back in later to add detail in this area. Work around the feathers that make up the top of the bird's body, blocking in the lower wings and body only. Next, put a small amount of the Italian burnt sienna into an empty well on your palette, and mix in a touch of the dark tone to gray it down. Use this shade to paint in the bird's breast, working the color around the line of feathers that make up the rooster's head and neck. Once you've applied color here, use a damp, clean brush to blend the brown into the green paint. This technique is called painting wet into wet, and it will allow us to make a nice transition between these two colors. For the rooster's feet, add water to your dark mixture and create a soft gray wash of color. Using this light gray, fill in the feet and pull the color up the legs right to the body of the bird. Once these first layers of color are applied, give your painting a chance to dry before continuing to work. This way, colors painted next to each other won't run into each other. Now that the painting is dry, use a mixture of Italian burnt sienna and water to add color to the rooster, starting with the head. Work around the details of the face by following your line drawing around all the structures surrounding the beak and eye. Pull the color down from the face using the point of your brush all the way to the rooster's body. When you've blocked in the color of the head, rinse your brush and let it dry slightly. Use this brush to pull out some color near the center of the head, creating a nice soft highlight. For an even softer looking shape, blend around the edges of the highlight with your brush. This gives some shape to the head. Using the same color, work your way down the bird's back, painting in the feathers that overlap the lower body of the rooster. Keep your brush loaded with paint and fill in these areas using quick strokes of color. Once you've filled this in, we'll create a similar highlighted area to add contour to the back. Rinse the brush, dry it slightly, and pull it through the center of this area to remove some of the paint. Remember to blend the edges if necessary. Now let's add in some of the details of the face. Mix a little water with the permanent red on your palette to get this paint flowing. You want a strong mixture with a high ratio of pigment to water in this mix. Add this bold color to the comb on top of the rooster's head. You can also use the point of your brush to outline this area and then just fill it in. Those black lines we made earlier will create a nice shadow to this red. Move down the head, around the eye and beak, and into all of the structures of the bird's face. To add more depth, you can take a clean, damp brush and pull out a soft highlight on the top of the comb. Now using the Italian burnt sienna, add a little color to the beak. For the tail feathers, load your brush with phthalo green. We'll take advantage of the vibrant and bold nature of this watercolor to produce some really dynamic feathers. Begin at the base of the tail and paint the feathers that we left white earlier. You can even overlap some of the dark gray we painted as you work your way down the tail. On the bird, these feathers are often iridescent, so the phthalo green is a perfect color to capture some of this brightness. As you paint in these areas, fill in the shapes of the line drawing by using the tip of your brush for control.